Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Essential Works by Composer X for Beginners, or Essential Works for Beginners by Composer X. Composer X is Handel. Now, Handel is a project. The reason that Handel is a project is that he wrote tons and tons and tons of music, most of which will be completely unknown to beginners. But it deserves to be. So this list should not be taken as you have to go listen to it right away, because you're talking about stuff that takes time, serious time. Let's talk about Handel's most famous piece, the Messiah, or just plain Messiah. Don't let snotty people tell you, oh, it's not called the Messiah, it's called Messiah. They used both in Handel's lifetime, just so you know. And so did he. So you're fine. Call it whatever you want. It's the thing with the Hallelujah chorus in it. That's the point. The Hallelujah chorus, which is about 3 minutes long, is absolutely glorious. Messiah, if you listen to all of it, is about 2 hours and 40 minutes long, or more or less, depending on which version, because Handel wrote different numbers for different singers and replaced it and all that. But the Messiah is an oratorio. An oratorio is a work for soloists and chorus and orchestra that essentially tells a story. Now, the story of the Messiah is the story of the birth of Jesus, and then the historical and religious implications of the birth of Jesus. It doesn't go to the crucifixion particularly, although it kind of gets you there. But it's not a depressing work. It's a celebratory work more than anything else. And the thing about an oratorio or an opera or any of these large vocal works by Handel is that they're going to last a good 2 to 3 hours, and they're going to have about 50 separate numbers in them. And those numbers can be choruses or arias, which are songs for the soloists, or recitative, which is sort of speech set to musical notes that connects the various numbers. The whole thing is sung, but you're going to get like 50 numbers. That's a lot. And it really sort of prevented me from enjoying Handel as much as I feel I would have had someone just told me what it was, what to expect. Because, I mean, you don't have to listen to it all at once, but you should listen to all of it at some point, because there is a really coherent, usually narrative thread most of the time, and a thread of musical contrasts that's very, very effective when you hear the sections complete, rather than just one bit here or one chorus there. It really, really works, and you will have a much better time and enjoy it much more for knowing the whole work. But how long it takes and how much you want to do is entirely up to you. So with that as the prelude, let us run down the list. And like I said, you take your time with this stuff. Do not rush into it, because it's great, great music that deserves to be savored slowly and luxuriously. Handel was a hedonist. His music is pure pleasure. It should make you feel warm and snuggly when you're listening to it. So, we began with Messiah. We've already talked about it. You know what it is. You know how long it lasts. And you should be all set. Next comes another oratorio, but this is an Old Testament oratorio. Most of Handel's oratorios were based on Old Testament stories because they're just more exciting. I mean, you've got plot, you've got character, you've got war, you've got battles, you've got love stories, you've got God doing vengeful things. It's just, it's just so much more fun, frankly, than the New Testament, where you've got the same story 4 times and then everybody talks about it. It's so much better to have different characters. You can do much more with it. So Handel's grandest Old Testament oratorio is Saul. It tells the story of Saul and David from the Old Testament. I mean, it's a famous, well-known story. Saul gets terribly, terribly jealous and tries to have David killed, and it doesn't work. And there's Goliath is in there, and, Philistines, and, oh, gosh, all kinds of fun people. You've got the witch of Endor. Remember the witch? She's the one who predicts the downfall of Saul, which gets him furiously jealous. Handel was what we call in the business a chord guy. Their composers fall into 2 varieties. There's line guys and chord guys. Line guys are like Bach. They like counterpoint. at all times. That is, multiple lines kind of playing off of each other. But chord guys love sound. They love timbre. They love the juicy sounds they can make from their orchestra. And Handel was definitely one of those. Now, all Baroque composers were contrapuntists, basically, because that was the style. It was a style that involved simultaneous interweaving of melodic lines in pieces like fugues and other things like that. But within that style, within those parameters, Handel was as sexy a composer as we find. He invented instruments. In Saul, he used trombones for like the first time in the history of England. He used a carillon. It's kind of like a glockenspiel bell thing that he used to drive Saul crazy, to do the welcome David. The bells going off. It represents the ringing in Saul's head as he steams with jealousy. I mean, he really found ways, and David, of course, plays the harp. I mean, he really found ways to use what was normally a very plain and uninteresting orchestra of just strings with maybe a few oboes or a horn or two, and do amazing things with large forces and with small forces. He created very succulent string textures by dividing up his violins into multiple parts. You hear all of that in Saul. It's a real story, a dramatic, fabulous story told in a series of arias and choruses, but it's like 3 hours long. So again, you got to take your time. And the next one is even longer. Oh my God, it's insane. It's an opera. It's Giulio Cesare in Egypt, Julius Caesar. Now, this is Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. You get Cleopatra. It's a love story. And Ptolemy, who was Cleopatra's evil brother who gets his just desserts in the end. But this thing goes on for 3 and some odd hours. And here, you don't even have choruses. I mean, there are a couple, but very few. What you have are what they call da capo arias. And these are arias that have the form ABA, where you have a first section and then a middle section, and then the first section comes back and is ornamented by the soloist to make it more elaborate and fun. But the point is, each of these arias or songs represents a stage in the development of the character. So how much the character develops depends on how many arias they get. And in this opera, both Caesar and Cleopatra have 8 each, which is a lot of music. And there are all the subsidiary characters who have half a dozen arias in another one. So you wind up with this enormous structure. And what matters is, first of all, the plot, how it moves along in the recitation between the various numbers, but also how these characters evolve. And one of the things that differentiates Handel's operas from those of a lot of his contemporaries is that he really understood how to build character in a series of songs for each character. And, if you heard all of them in a row, for example, you would be able to follow very easily the evolution of each character. What makes it harder, of course, is that you're following the story and they don't sing one after the other. They sing, then a bunch of other people do theirs, and then so they're interleaving. And that makes it a lot more work as a listener for you. And again, because these things are just ridiculously long by our standards today, you need to take your time with it. In Handel's day, it had to be that long. People expected to be entertained. Not only did they expect to be entertained by hearing these arias go on endlessly, but they also wanted to have concertos during the intermissions and maybe a ballet at the end. I mean, people expected to spend the day at the theater. So it was a very, very different culture, musical culture, from what we're used to today. But Julius Caesar is widely regarded as Handel's greatest opera. It has, again, amazing instrumental resources. It's got harps and mandolins and horns and stuff. And, it's just great. Absolutely great. But take your time, as I've said already several times. Next, some of Handel's liturgical music. Now, Handel wrote very, very little religious music that wasn't ceremonial music. For example, the coronation anthems, which have been played at every English coronation anthem since 1740-something, or his Dettingen Te Deum, a prayer to celebrate the victory in battle, something like that. But when he was in Rome, learning his trade, he wrote a couple of Latin sacred pieces, and the most fun is the Dixit Dominus. Now, Dixit Dominus is a psalm setting. It's like Psalm, I don't know what psalm it is. I never paid attention to that, but it's one of the 150 psalms. Pick a number. It's probably the Dixit Dominus. It's not one of the nice psalms, where we only do the nice ones, the ones that talk about, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, that kind of thing. No, 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 no. This is God is going to smite the enemy and destroy them and crush them and stomp on their brains and splatter their bodies all over the place. Oh, it's fabulous. It's fabulous. You read the text, you cannot believe that people actually say this in prayer. You really won't. And it has a battle scene in it because Handel was inveterately theatrical and dramatic. No matter what text he was setting, he seized on those words and set them to appropriate music. And in this case, the words are conquasabit in multuorum something whatever. It's he will smite the heads of the peoples and crush them utterly. And he has the chorus doing a war chant. And they're going conquasa sa 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 like this. Oh, it's marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. You're not going to believe that this is a piece of sacred music. It probably scared the crap out of the people in Rome during, at the day when they heard that. It's a virtuosic masterpiece. So the Handel Dixit Dominus is wonderful, and it's a fabulous place to start with Handel's instrumental music, because even then, at this early stage, he had an absolute mastery of the human voice, particularly choruses, choral settings, variety of texture and rhythm and accent in choral settings that make them so thrilling and fabulous. It's amazing. So after that, we're going to go back to his English language stuff, Alexander's Feast. Now, Alexander's Feast, it's Alexander's Feast or the Power of Music, is not exactly an oratorio. It's an ode. And an ode is a little different. It's a setting of a poem, which they break up into bits and arrange for soloists and choruses, just like they do in an oratorio. But it doesn't tell a story quite as extensively as you'll hear in an oratorio or in an opera. So Alexander's Feast also is shorter. It's like about 2 hours, a little bit shy of 2 hours. It was so short that Handel wrote an extra concerto to stick in the middle of it, to make it longer. And it's one of his greatest works. It's so much fun to listen to. I can't even go into the details, but it has to do with, all these people having a feast and they're driven by the power of music to go and wipe out a Persian city. I mean, isn't that happy? And they have a very good time doing it. And you will have a very good time listening to it. Guaranteed. It's absolutely amazing. So then, last but not least, we're going to do another opera-like thing, Acis and Galatea. Now, this is another English language one. Handel set the story twice, but they have nothing in common, which is very interesting because Handel used to steal from himself and anybody else, constantly. And you would think that in doing the same story twice, he would use the same music, but he doesn't. He doesn't use any of the same music. Acis and Galatea is a pastoral ode, again, but it was the most popular piece that Handel wrote in his lifetime. It was performed and produced everywhere because it required very few people, and it was for small forces and a small orchestra, and it was affordable, and people loved it. There's no reason they loved it. It was fabulous. It's a story of Acis is a shepherd, and Galatea is a sea nymph, and there's a cyclops named Polyphemus, or Polyphemo in Italian, in the Italian version. And Polyphemus also has the hots for Galatea, and he's upset and jealous at Acis, so he crushes him to death with a boulder. And when he's dead, Galatea prays to the god Neptune, who turns him into a stream that flows endlessly to the sea so that she can lament her lover or something like that. I don't know. There's some transformation thing at the end. It's really pretty, really fun. And as you can hear, it only has it's 4 characters, basically. 3 or 4 characters, depending on how you do it. And a little chorus. And at the very end of part 1, they are so happy that they're going to be together forever. And they sing a number called Happy We that just has those words. Happy, happy, happy we, happy, happy, happy we, happy, 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 happy. It's the happiest thing anyone ever wrote. It's so happy, it's giddy. You'll be giggling by the time it's over. It's astonishing. So Acis and Galatea is also short. So that's a good place to get yourself started too. I gave you some of the big ones up front because I don't think there's any point in hiding the fact that Handel was a composer on the grandest possible scale. But he also wrote pieces that are shorter, and they may be better for you if you want to take it that way. None of this is in any particular order. Do it however you think it's going to work for you. So now we're going to pause from the vocal universe for a while, because some of you who think, operatic voices are irritating or you can't stand to hear them, you want to hear some instrumental music. So instrumental music, we begin with the 12 Concerti Grossi, Opus 6, 12 absolutely gorgeous concertos for string orchestra. Now, a concerto grosso is a Baroque form where you have a large group of instruments, strings, opposed by a smaller group of stringed instruments like two violins and a cello, or a violin, a viola, and a cello, or whatever it wants, as many as you want, however you want to do it. And they alternate. They just go back and forth, and the piece can have anything from 3 to 8 movements. It's Handel's music is an inexhaustible variety of forms and shapes and sizes. Nothing is ever quite the same. But these are the apex of the Baroque Concerto Grosso. They're extraordinarily beautiful. And I don't need to say anything else about them because they're just incredibly tuneful, and you listen to them and you're just going to love the sound of them. You'll be humming when you're in the shower. You will. I do. See, it works. It's amazing. So after that, we're going to do the water music. Now, I just did a talk about pieces I just don't get. I still don't get after all these years. The water music is one of those. The water music is nice. I mean, it's a bunch of individual little dance pieces that he wrote to be played on a barge in the middle of the Seine River while the king had one of his boating excursions to watch the sewage float down next to him or whatever he was doing on his barge. And it's charming and it's fun and it's tuneful and people just adore it. And I don't adore it as much as most people do, but that's me. It's an incredibly famous piece. You have to know that it exists. It's not as much fun, in my view. It's about an hour of it, by the way, and you can arrange it in different suites depending on what key the pieces are in and all that. What I have fun with is the royal fireworks music. Yes, this was written for the piece of Et la Chapelle, and to celebrate something or other. And oh my goodness, what a mess it was. The fireworks went wrong. The whole stage caught fire. Somebody got killed or burned to death. Oh, it was just terrific. Absolutely terrific. But this is the largest piece of music ever written for wind ensemble, at least up to that time, and really for a long time thereafter. I mean, it's written for a zillion horns and 12 oboes and 12 bassoons and a bunch of snare drums and oh God, it's more fun than anyone has any right to have. It really is. And some period performances now have been doing it in its original wind scoring. Handel later added violins, which I don't think helped at all. And if you listen to it in its original form with double timpani and stuff, oh God, it's thrilling. Unbelievably thrilling. However, we have to wrap things up. And we're going to wrap things up with Handel's own favorite oratorio. And that was Theodora. Now, I told you that most Handel oratorios are not on New Testament stories. Messiah was an exception, and it's not really a narrative. It's a sequence of vignettes or portraits. But Theodora does tell a story, but it's an apocryphal story. It's not really directly from the New Testament because, like I said, there are no good stories in the New Testament. Ha ha. There was only Theodora. Theodora was absolutely Handel's favorite piece because it has a wonderful story. Theodora is a Christian martyr who's in love with Didymus, who's a Roman soldier, and the Christians are being persecuted, and Didymus decides to save Theodora, who was captured by the Romans, and she's threatened with being sold off as a prostitute in the temple of Prostitutia, or whatever temple that was, and she's going to be killed, and he often offers to go to death for her. They spend the whole oratorio trying to die for each other, basically. They rescue each other, and all this stuff happens. But the music is so beautiful and so heartfelt. And it really is an exquisite piece of music. It was Handel's second to the last oratorio. He was going blind. He was in ill health. And it really he really wrote it out of love because, as he said, the Jews aren't going to come because it's a Christian story, and the women aren't going to come because it's a virtuous story. And he was right. It was a flop in his lifetime. And it's really now that it's been revived. It's been revived both as an oratorio and on stage as an opera, because it really does work that way. It works beautifully that way. In fact, and the choruses of Romans are so much fun. They're happy pagans having a grand old time. And the God-fearing Christians, like the God-fearing Jews, spend most of their time lamenting. It makes you kind of root for the pagans, actually. But it's a stunning, stunning work. And once you get to know your Handel, you may want to give Theodora a try. Or, alternately, you may want to start with Theodora, knowing that it was Handel's favorite work. That doesn't mean it's his best work, but it was his favorite work. And maybe that'll tell you something about it, about your approach to it or the way you listen. So those are my 10, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 essential works to begin your Handel collection. For many of you, that will be enough for any Handel collection. Others may want to explore further. And if you do, you'll have all the knowledge and tools you need to enjoy the rest of his output, which is, like I said, huge but extraordinary and so worth your time, assuming you have a lot of time, of course. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.